there. I want to ask a quick question, and I'm going to ask you to just, if you can, use the reactions at the bottom of your Zoom window. You'll see a little kind of, it looks like a circle smiley face. It says reactions. On that, there'll be a yes or no button. And I want you to ask this question. I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to ask you to put a yes or a no. Currently, are your meetings, the meetings you have with your teams, engaging? Are they, kind of really everything that you want them to be? Are they kind of up to what you want to see achieved? If that's the case for you, I want you to put a big resounding yes. If not the case, then maybe a little bit of a no on there. How many of you would say you have got some really engaging meetings? Ken, you have meetings with one person. And your meetings, and you're saying they're not engaging. I think there's going to be a challenge. All right. We're seeing some yeses and some nos. The reality is that most of us would say that not all of our meetings are all that exciting, that there can be times when they're not very engaging. In fact, there was some research that came out from the Harvard Business Journal a couple of years ago, in which they did a massive survey among employees, and they discovered that, I think, a couple of interesting stats. One was that 90% of people report daydreaming during team meetings, and this one was really interesting. 73% of people admitted to doing other work while they were attending a meeting. Now, I'm not going to ask for a show of hand from you whether or not you're maybe perhaps guilty of that or not. But the reality is many of us can relate to that, is the meetings. How many times have we seen, there's, of course, comments, memes, there's all kinds of stuff. That meeting should have been an email. Oftentimes, that's the kind of stuff that happens. I am excited because here at Rhapsody, I will brag about this, and I mentioned this on social media as well. We continually see, when we ask for feedback from our team on how valuable or helpful that meeting we consistently see 9 or higher out of a score of 10. In fact, most of our team would say that it has been a long time since we have had an ineffective or boring meeting. And the reason for that is because of the structure and the way that we develop and design our meetings. And I will say that our presenter today, who is Eric Deschamps, who is one of our partners here at Rhapsody Strategies, Eric has been the one who has really led the design and creation of the structure for meetings at Rhapsody. He has been the one that has really instituted a lot of the stuff that we do, and the reason why our meetings are as engaging as they are. And so I can't think of anyone who will really be able to provide such great insight and tangible suggestions that we can, as we talk about leading effective meetings, taking our meetings from boring to something that is a lot more significant. So Eric, I know that we're going to have you share really a lot of the conversation here, but maybe let's start out by just framing, what do you see as kind of some of the major issues or challenges as to why meetings are often so boring?
Part of it is, well, hello, everyone. It's great to be here. Great to have you all on the call. And I look forward to, of course, all my colleagues at Rhapsody jumping in where they feel they want to add something. I've been asked to kind of lead the charge here, but the reality is our meetings, the caliber of our meetings is really a team effort. And it's both the structure and the contribution of every person around the table that make them what they are. I think, Rob, there's a number of core issues that contribute to what we as leaders often see as the bane of our existence. Most meetings, the meeting host doesn't enjoy them, and neither does the participants. And we're hoping to get them over as soon as possible and get the hell out of Dodge. That's kind of how we approach most of them. And yet it shouldn't be this way. We have talked with, at this point, probably thousands of leaders and hundreds of organizations in our work with them. And I have yet, and I think my colleagues would echo the same thought, we have yet to meet an organization that over communicates. Communication's always a problem. There's always a shortage. There's always a breakdown. And one of the things that has to shift for leaders is their understanding that your meetings, your organized meetings with your team, are your primary channel of formal communication. In organizations, we have formal communication, we have informal. Informal, well, there's less of that these days because a lot of folks are working from home, so we're not running into each other in the hallway or in the lunchroom or passing by each other's office and kind of poking our head in and saying, hey, can I have 5 minutes of your time? There's a lot of informal communication that happens in organizations, but your meetings are your primary way to communicate what you want to communicate in a more contextualized, holistic fashion. I know a lot of organizations that say, well, we don't do meetings that much because we don't have time. I can guarantee you, if you're not doing your meetings right, or you're not doing meetings regularly, you're spending more than the meeting time required in fixing problems, fixing bad communication, revisiting the issue, fixing confusion and fog within the organization. The time that you think you're saving by shortening your meeting time or eliminating your meeting time, you're paying in spades in all kinds of other areas in the business. So there's a few things, Rob. I think one is a focus problem. I think one of the reasons why meetings are ineffective is that they're unfocused. We're trying to do too much at once. We're trying to have an operational tactical meeting and then do some brainstorming and then strategic planning. And we're trying to go left brain, right brain and bounce back and forth multiple times during a 75, 90-minute time frame. And the human psyche just doesn't work very well that way. And so part of it is focusing your meetings on what the issue is at hand and really sticking to it. What we really see is an engagement problem. That's another major issue. In most organizations, you've got one person or the same 2 or 3 people or small group of people doing all the talking at every meeting, and the vast majority are remaining silent. So people are disengaged. They're not really present, or they feel overpowered by the stronger personalities in the room. And that's often a combination of 2 things. When only a few are participating and engagement is so low, it's usually a reflection of a bad meeting structure and the need for the leader to learn some good facilitation skills. And we can dive into some of that during our call today. Another key issue that I've seen and we've noticed is a culture problem, where, again, meetings are not treated with the degree of importance that they should be. One of the first questions I'll ask a leadership team when I start coaching them is, so talk to me about how often you get together in a formal way to discuss the business. And they'll say, oh, twice a month. And I'll say, okay, that's what you schedule. Now talk to me about how often you hold to that schedule. And what's frightening is, well, we actually haven't had a meeting in like 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 6 months, because the meeting gets booked, but it's given importance in words only. It's interesting how everything else in the business, any crisis, any issue, can easily trump that and send it to the back of the line in terms of the priorities. And that's a culture problem. Would you do that to your best client? Right? That as soon as something came up that was pressing, you'd cancel on them last minute. Of course you wouldn't. You'd think twice before you did that. Well, your team, they're your most important stakeholders. They're your first, they're your best clients. If you can get them on the same page, then everything else will follow. So if that's how we think about meetings, then there's really a culture problem. The other culture issue, Rob, is this whole notion of, in a lot of organizations, we say we want input and feedback, and yet a lot of employees don't feel safe giving input and feedback. We've seen it in a lot of companies with a lot of leaders where asking a question is literally asking for trouble. Disagreeing with the boss or whoever's leading the meeting again, that's a major culture problem. That's a sign of a closed, restricted type of culture. And I can guarantee you that in that kind of culture, innovation cannot shine, and the best ideas are not coming forward. You basically have 1 or 2 people's agenda that's kind of driving things.
So we've got, just to jump in here, that we've got, I think there's some great issues that you've mentioned there about, whether it's focus, the engagement, the culture. And one of the things I do want to encourage, whether it's in the chat window here in Zoom, or for those of you that are watching on Facebook, you can certainly use the chat window there. I know that Trevor is monitoring the chat window, and if you add some thoughts to the chat window there, he'll move them over to the Zoom call and make sure that they get included. And certainly, so encourage you to write down if you think of some other issues or some things that maybe fall outside of those 3 kind of, I think they're really large categories, some big categories of where some of the issues are as to why we don't have the kind of meetings we want to have. I really want to make sure that, and you know, Eric, you and I in prep for this meeting, conversation that we had was, there's so much here. We could probably, you know, we could do a 2-hour seminar on this and easily fill the content. And we're trying to kind of summarize this in about 15 minutes, maybe even 10 minutes. So maybe let's dive into some really practical, some of the things that you have done, because again, as I mentioned, and you really have here at Rhapsody, implement so much of what you're going to talk about here in the next few minutes has been implemented here at Rhapsody. We experience it in all of our meetings. What are some of the things that a business owner can do to address those 3 issues that you just mentioned?
One is, I mean, there's a lot of really practical steps one can take. I have to say that you have to be very, very deliberate as a leader to do this. We are often so deliberate in so many areas of our business, and then meetings are an afterthought. So we kind of throw together an agenda at the last minute and hope that we're going to be able to pull off a really powerful conversation that's going to help the business. You have to develop a system around this so that your meetings are of high caliber. So one of the first things you have to do as a leader is develop and communicate a vision for what you hope your meetings to become. You've got to own what they are now, right? You've got to own and face the music on why they are the way that they are now. And where perhaps part of that is on your side of the equation, to just own that. And again, get clear on what you hope your meetings should be and could be. Articulate that to your team. So cast a vision of what you're hoping to begin to shift and change. And then use your meeting time, the beginning of every meeting, at least in the early months that you're implementing new strategies to shift things. Remind them of this vision and remind them of what we're trying to achieve together, because people will tend to fall back into their old habits, and even the facilitator, it's easy to slide back into those old habits. One of the most powerful things that you can do, of course, we all know that a meeting without an agenda is going to be a problematic meeting. It's going to be all over the place. What I've also seen, though, is draconian type agendas set by 1 or 2 people. And it's one person who says, I think we should talk about this, and this.
Right.
And everybody around the table goes, okay. Right. And as the items are getting checked off, we're not really focused on engagement and finding the best way forward and discovering the truth about the issue at hand. We're just like counting. Okay, we've only got 10 left. Now we've got 9 left. Now we've got 8 left. Like we're kind of just going through the motions. We believe in what's called a structured real-time agenda, and I cannot do it justice in the time frame that we have here today, but the gist of it is using a structure where you're checking in on key areas of the business, especially if this is a tactical or operational type meeting, where people can contribute ideas ahead of time that might be then become items of discussion, either in a shared document or a shared messaging system or of that nature. But that part of the agenda is open to be determined as part of the meeting. In other words, when we sit down to have a meeting together, let's say our leadership team meetings at Rhapsody, we may have each contributed some ideas. So we have already a growing list of what we may need to discuss that day. But then we always ask the question before we jump in to say, what else, what else, what else? What else has come up that we need to discuss? And so we're creating the agenda in real time and then prioritizing that list and determining what is it that actually matters. Because we may have come with some predetermined ideas, but then by having that conversation, somebody contributes something and we realize, you know what, that's more important than these 3 other items. So we're going to defer those and we're going to focus over here. There's a saying that where people do not weigh in, they will not buy in. The reason engagement is so low is because 1 or 2 people are setting the tone of the entire conversation, and we're not soliciting the heartbeat of the business from the people who know it best, who are engaged in various levels of it. So real-time agenda is a very, very powerful tool. Not a free-for-all. It's a structured real-time agenda. Really, really powerful, powerful approach. This next one may seem like obvious, but you know, have you all heard the phrase common sense? Have you heard that phrase before? It's just common sense. I'm convinced they should stop calling most things common sense, Because if it was common sense, it'd be a hell of a lot more common. Right? And you'd think that common sense would be that at the end of every meeting, based on the discussions we've had, we are capturing clear next steps, clear action items with owners, who owns those actions, and we're determining timelines, okay? In a lot of meetings, this isn't happening. And if it's happening, if we're capturing them, we're not revisiting them at the next meeting. And so stuff is slipping, stuff is like just falling through the cracks. One of the most important things you need to do is capture decisions, capture actions, assign an owner, and set a deadline. One of the first things you do in your real-time agenda next time you meet, all right, how are we doing? Are we on track or off track? And we keep things going. Let me say this about virtual meetings, because that's obviously the dynamic that most of us are in now, especially in Ontario with the current lockdown. Only essential workers are allowed in the office. But let me say this: the problem with you, Rob, you mentioned the statistic. What was it? A high percentage of people admitting to doing other work while they're in a meeting.
73%.
73%. Do you know that that's probably far worse now with virtual meetings, because you're literally sitting in front of your computer and you got your email program open and your messenger and your browser and listen, on a webinar, that's fine. Like, a webinar is a bit of a different animal, but in a business meeting or in a team meeting, we need to shut that stuff down. We need to be disciplined, and the facilitator should actually be encouraging folks. Let's turn off email right now. Let's shut down everything else and let's focus on this meeting. One of the things that's really is a pet peeve for me is when we're in meetings. Again, a webinar is a different animal, so I'm not picking on anyone on this call, but in team meetings where people don't even turn on their video window, right? I want you to think about attending a real meeting, like in person, and hiding under the conference room table with your laptop, right? And because you don't want to show your face to your colleagues. Like, how awkward would that be? It would just be weird. So turn on your video, like engage and look at each other in the eyes.
Eric, we're laughing because David, the second you said, as you're saying the words "turn on your video,"
I knew what he was getting at. I knew what he was getting
at. I was picking on you, David. I was like, why is his video not on?
Because I've aged so much since I last saw you. That's why.
Great comments. So sorry, go ahead. I jumped in there, Eric, but it just.
No, it's fine. That's fine. So a virtual, like, engage as best you can, eliminate distractions. Couple of more things that I think are really, really critical is a creative feedback loop, right? This is like customer service, where every business owner thinks they're providing great customer service to their client base. And when they tell me that, I'm always like, how do you know? When's the last time you asked them? What feedback loops do you have in place to actually confirm that assertion? Well, if you're going to improve something, you have to measure it. You have to check in on it. And so one of the practices at Rhapsody, every single meeting, we finish the meeting by simply asking this question on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being high: how would you rate the quality and effectiveness of this meeting? Right? And that's what Rob was referring to earlier, where we're constantly at 9 or higher with our meetings, but we check in. And if somebody gives us a low score, and it's happened on a handful of occasions, we will follow up with that individual after the meeting to simply ask, so listen, you gave us a 6, we appreciate the honesty. What could we do next time to change that 6 into a 10? And we're getting feedback in real time about why they rated it that way and how we could make it better. So feedback
and on that, Eric, we don't go and say, how dare you gave us a 6. It's right to your point. These are not judgmental. We're not taking it personal. There is a genuine desire to learn when feedback is low, and I think that's important. There's Ken has mentioned, he's got a couple of comments in there which I appreciate so much, about how people's eyes will roll when there's an over talker or oversharer, and I know that that's going to be an element that you dive into. Maybe so. Let's talk a little bit about that one as another area of challenge.
Absolutely. Listen, one of the other things that if you're leading meetings on a regular basis, invest in some facilitation training of some sort or get some coaching. Most of us have to conduct meetings on a regular basis, and it's something we've never been trained on how to do. So We've all been frustrated where we're sitting in a meeting and a facilitator is allowing 2 or 3 people to dominate the entire conversation, right? We've been part of meetings where we know there's some brilliant people around the table, but perhaps they're like me, they're shy. They're more quiet. The more quiet. No, not at all. But they're more quiet. They're more shy. So they tend to hold back and let the more verbally confident and louder people kind of take over. But what's happening is we're not getting all the best ideas on the table, right? We're not getting everybody's thinking. So a good facilitator learns how to manage the over talkers and draw out the ones that perhaps need a bit of encouragement. And Trev, you had a great comment as we were preparing for this about even the impact of DISC and how we might what we might consider in that aspect.
Yeah, it's interesting. We know there's so many different styles and ways of communicating, of processing information, of getting things done. For some, they're very extroverted. They're great in the moment. They're really fast, all of that. Other people want time to consider things. They want time to think them through. They want to look at their options. They want to prepare a little bit. And so if everything is just you walk into a meeting and there isn't an agenda, you're like, okay, today we're talking about this. You're already kind of disadvantaging part of your group. You're not actually playing to their strengths. Right. And our goal as leaders is to bring out the strengths in our entire team, regardless of what those strengths are. And actually, we're hoping for a diversity of strengths. That's what makes a team even stronger. So in the center of this is being able to, share in advance what you want to talk about, be able to raise some of those issues so people can prepare accordingly. If there's a complex topic that needs to be addressed, sometimes even the meeting can come to a preliminary decision to say, now let's give it 24 hours and we're going to revisit, just to check in to make sure we've had some time to consider, to think it through, to let the dust settle, whatever metaphor you want to use. You can have a little bit of space so that it's playing to everyone's strengths instead of just the strengths of a few key players, because it really is a risk in some organizations.
Yeah, and that's brilliant, Trev. I mean, the reality is that most of our meetings, it's for those of you familiar with the DISC model, D's and I's take up a lot of space while the S's and C's almost get lost in all the noise. And that's unfortunate because everyone has great input to give, maybe not on every issue, but we need to be working at drawing people out. So working on your facilitation skills. Let me finish with this one. And I know because we're almost out of time and we will have the question and answer period, Rob, that you mentioned in just a couple of minutes, and I'm looking forward to diving into that with you. But the last thing I would say is get an outside perspective, get some help. Okay, for those of you on this call that are in a coaching relationship with Rhapsody or perhaps another coaching organization, what's a great approach is to bring this up with your coach and talk about how to take it to the next level. One of the things we'll do is we'll actually participate in your meeting as a fly on the wall initially, just to observe and listen. Listen to and watch for the dynamics at play, provide them feedback post that event to the entire group, and then come back again to a future meeting to see how you're doing and actually coach you in real time during your meeting to help you take it to the next level. So getting an outside perspective can make a huge difference. How do you know, for those of you that have trained right in a gym, how do you know your form is right when you're training alone? You need someone to look at you and say, hey, no, you're not quite in the right position here. You might injure yourself, or that's not the optimum way to do it. So getting an outside perspective, getting some outside support, I can't emphasize enough. This is more important than you realize. The quality of your meetings. An organization is the sum of its conversations. The quality of the conversation impacts the quality of the organization in a massive way. And so investing the right time and energy into making sure that every conversation is as impactful as possible will yield a massive ROI in your leadership and in your business.
Yeah, and I think that you're right. We have oftentimes we'll have for those of you that are working with a coach, as coaches, we've been asked to, can we take one of our coaching sessions, or could we even just add an extra session this month so that we to attend a meeting for that very reason. And we really can, as much as, some of you that are coached by a Rhapsody coach are going to chuckle when I suggest we really can sit there quietly. We really can. We can just sit back and not participate, but just take it in, making notes, and then bring that feedback to you as well. So do encourage you to do that, to reach out. Another thing that we want to make available to you, and we're about to shift gears here in just a moment, but one of the things that we do want to make available for you is we do have kind of a PDF version of the meeting outline that we use for the leadership team at Rhapsody. So this is when Eric and Trevor and I are having our leadership meetings. We follow a very clear agenda, and we're true to that agenda. I mean, the three of us are good friends, and we can go off on all kinds of tangents if we're not careful. And that's why we use the agenda as kind of a way to keep some guidelines for us. We can make that available to you. If you're working with a Rhapsody coach already, just reach out to your coach and ask for a copy of that PDF if you want to see it, and we'll make sure that they get it to you. And if not, the purpose of why I've got my name is listed as my email address. You can see it right there, rob@rhapsodystrategies.com. Send me an email, and I will get that PDF of that meeting structure out to you right away. And we'll be doing that. Our next meeting, again, we do these always the third Wednesday of every month. So the third Wednesday of May, we're going to be talking about partnerships. And I think this is one of those unique areas. So if you're a business owner, you're in a business where you have partners, or even if you're a solo owner, but you've got key leaders who are very much running the business with you, a CEO, COO, CFO, whatever that might be. We're going to talk about the unique dynamics of working as partners in a business and how to do that well. Again, it's an area that we have experience in at Rhapsody, and I think it's something that we've really been able to conquer that one, and we've solved some of the challenges, and we want to be able to provide some insight into that. So that's going to happen the third Wednesday of May, starting at 4 o'clock for that 30 minutes. There's been some great comments. There's been some great insight in the chat window. And I appreciate everything that has been there. I want to do one last thing before we end this call, and we're going to pretend it's a meeting. And I want you all just to get ready with the chat window on a scale of 1 to 10. How valuable or helpful was this meeting for you today? And I want you just to throw a score in the chat window for us. Steve, at 9.5, I figured you'd do like a 9.2678 or something like that, but. Awesome. Look at all those grade 8s and 9s, and thank you very much. It is a great way to get some very quick feedback. All right, let's shift gears. Questions, comments. I know right now the chat window is filling up with scores, so I thank you for that. Keep those going for sure. Questions, comments, insight that you want to provide. If you've got a question specific to one of to Eric, who's led this, or one of the Rhapsody team, or you just want to bring some insight into what are some things that you've learned in your meeting structure that have worked really well. Let's hear from one another. Ken.
Okay, thanks, Rob.
There you go.
Yeah, we started off this conversation with Rob pointing out that I only meet with myself, which is true. But I actually do interviews. I do interviews of people who are dealing with harassment, violence in the workplace. And one of these actually went 7 hours a week ago, and every minute of it was worthwhile. But you sometimes have people in the room who really take a lot of time, a lot of effort to pull things out, and then go back to the disc model. And then you got people who, just snap, they can go to it. So how do you manage that mix of people when, you want to draw stuff out of people? It's going to take a while to get there, but the rest are, kind of pointing to the watch. So how do you deal with that?
That's a fantastic question, Ken. And one of the things is just honoring the different personalities. So part of it is that the temptation can be to shut down your D's and I's too quickly, especially at the beginning, in an effort to make room for the C's and S's. But look at your more verbal, communicative members of your team, that they're there at the use them to help things get started. Help them, use them to prime the pump, because they will start to generate energy. They'll start to generate ideas around the issues at hand. and often trying to start with the group, the folks around the table that are tend to hold things a bit closer to the chest and not as verbal, can be a real tough slog. So respect and just honor the fact that people are different and use that to your advantage. If the more open and communicative members of your team begin to take over and they're not giving up enough space, part of it is using DISC perhaps, or a model like it, to educate your team on how to honor one another in meetings and make room for one another and serve one another in meetings, so that D's and I's understand that it is their tendency to take up too much room, take up too much airtime. And that the C's and S's, we're gonna be asking you guys, we're gonna be asking our D's and I's to kind of censor themselves from time to time and be conscious of how much airtime they're taking. And we're gonna encourage this group over here. We're gonna encourage you guys to take a risk and speak out more. And by doing that, again, that's part of casting that vision of what you're trying to create and reminding people of it. If a person is forgetting their cue and they're just talking, I'll often say, well, hey, Ken, great to hear from you on this issue. We've already heard from you on a couple of issues. I'd really love to hear from a few, the rest of you around the table, what you think on this particular topic. And because we've laid the foundation of the work, you're sitting there going, got it. I did it again. Yeah. Thanks for the reminder. And no one's getting upset. No one's feeling like they've been walked all over. So again, deliberate intention. That's the key to being able then to manage people more effectively in those conversations.
Steve, you want to jump in?
Yeah, that's great, Eric. And Eric prompted the thought for me, and that is, our meetings don't happen in a vacuum. We're in relationships with people. There's other things going on, projects and things that we're involved in together. And one of the things that has really helped my clients have productive meetings is the training that we provide outside of those meetings on building high performance teams.
Yeah. And
some of you may have experienced that training, but in those training times, we take a lot of time getting to know each other's DISC styles, so that when we arrive in the meeting, we've got a lot of relational goodwill and understanding, shared language, maybe even some good jokes that we have back and forth about our DISC styles, some good humored, good natured stuff. And then one of the things that we do, especially on Zoom, is everybody puts their DISC style next to their name. So, Steve S, and Rob C, or whatever that might be. And then we remember, oh yeah, I have to be reminded that this person is in the room or in the Zoom with a different personality. But I just chime in with that.
Yeah,
that's great. That's excellent. Other questions, thoughts? And no, Bruce, Steve is not in Ottawa. He's in Calgary. And in Calgary, in about 20 minutes, they're going to get a blizzard.
That's right. I think I saw Amy. Did you have your hand up? Oh, yes.
Yeah, Amy.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if you had any advice for when you're in a collaborative situation, a kind of think tank meeting where there isn't a clear leader for the meeting, but you're not the one who called the meeting, and it's not, progressing. I just wanted to know if there was like some diplomatic advice for sort of leading things along if they're not being super productive, if there's a lot of lulls in the conversation.
Yeah, that's a tough one, especially if you don't have sort of decision-making power in the moment to do something about it. I think collaboration is always the goal. For me, collaboration is, and our team will understand the language, is not artificial harmony, it's productive conflict. That's where we're entering the fray together and we're debating the issue and we're coming at it from different angles. And, everyone's ego is not so fragile that it can't handle their idea getting thrown around a little bit, because again, it's about the ultimate pursuit of truth. It's not about one person's idea. It's about the right idea, the best idea coming forward. Any meeting without a facilitator is a mistake. It's a fiasco just waiting to happen. Think of it's like the headless horseman. It's not going to work, right? When you have too many leaders in a meeting, You know, in the animal kingdom, anything with more than one head is considered a monster. So there's something about, even in collaboration, having someone who is tasked with keeping the meeting on point, keeping it on track, facilitating and engaging, making sure people are participating, holding people to the rules of engagement that we've agreed to. If you find yourself in a meeting like that, or a meeting that's not like that at all, it's the complete opposite, as you're describing, Amy, often it's, if it's this, is this like an ongoing thing? Like it's more than just one meeting, you're meeting regularly and they're like this?
Yeah, it's a collaboration for an exhibition. So we're at the concept stage, at the brainstorming stage, and I have gone through a couple of them where it's just really sort of dragging on. But as the person who didn't call the meeting, I don't feel that comfortable stepping in and saying, okay, let's crack on.
Yeah, I would encourage you. I mean, in a situation like that, we have to make a decision. We're either going to just do our best with what's been served here and hope for the best, or have a conversation with the powers that be. Who is the influencer? Who is in charge? Can we have some, I'd love to have a chat with you about perhaps how we could take our meetings to the next level or be more effective when we get together. Again, you may deal with, as soon as you offer help, unfortunately, a lot of folks have a fragile ego, so they take that personally. So you might, you know, hopefully you're working with a leader that's open and willing and eager to grow. And if you're not, then you've just got to, it's a bit of a gamble. You either stay on the silent side, do the best with what you've got, or you take that risk to raise the issue in private with the person in charge, and see if you can't start a conversation, and even perhaps see that conversation come down to the whole team to say, how could we talk? How could we make these meetings more? We've met a couple times now. What do you guys think? How could we make these meetings more effective? That would be ideal, but not always possible, right?
Catherine, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just want to build on what Eric was saying there is, I know that the leadership team, Eric, Trevor, and Rob, they take turns facilitating. And I know that's worked very well for them. And so I know for boards, sometimes the advice that we will suggest is everybody take a turn facilitating. Now, guaranteed there are going to be better facilitators than other people, but it's a wonderful learning environment in a safe place. So maybe suggesting that everybody take a turn at facilitating. But going back to what Eric said, you know, having a direct conversation is sometimes the best way to find a solution for these things, and doing it in a group setting so that everybody gets to have a say on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Trev, let me, I'm gonna let you jump in on this, and then while you're sharing some thoughts, Eric, I want you to be thinking around this. I received a private message, somebody asking about literature. Are there some suggestions around reading material, stuff that might be of value to people wanting to develop their facilitation, meeting facilitation thing? So maybe just put some thought into that. But Trev.
Amy, first off, it's lovely to see you. That's a nice surprise. I was smiling as you described that, because I can't count the number of meetings that I've been in the past where you're sitting there going, this thing is going nowhere. It's a ship without a sail and a rudder or anything else. And we're just drifting around and spending a lot of time on it. And then when you told me you're in the brainstorming phase, that's usually where it's looser than any other phase, because we're about trying to open it up and bring more ideas. So I have deep empathy for you in that situation. Well, one of the things you can do to help bring a little bit of structure is, especially when you've got relationships with peers, you're in a collaborative kind of model, is to start to just share with them what you need to be most helpful. So don't go after the why doesn't this meeting have an agenda, but you can say, so just so I can contribute best, can we just take a second just to get really clear on what do we want to end the meeting with today? Because that will help me contribute more or do a little bit better. But make it about you in a way where it's not really about you. Because as soon as you, to Eric's point, as soon as you start to go after the structure or the agenda or the approach, someone notionally built that or has ownership of that, and egos can start to collide. So it's a great way to just say, here, I want to, contribute as best I can here. A couple things that would really help me, maybe to help others too, I don't know, but can you help me with this? So it's almost an ask for help, but it's a great way to start to ask for the things that are core for a good meeting and a good conversation.
That's great advice, Trev. Great advice. Rob, to your question of probably one of the best books on leading effective meetings. It's not heavy on facilitation skills, but certainly powerful in terms of understanding how humans behave and what's the best way to get engagement. And actually, many of the principles that we've adopted would come from this particular resource, not exclusively, but the lion's share for sure would be Patrick Lencioni's Death by Meeting. A phenomenal book. And if you've not read any of Lencioni's material, it's excellent because it's unlike most business leadership books, it's written like a business story. It reads like a fiction book, but you will recognize yourself in some of the players and the characters in the story. And only at the end of the book does he summarize the principles. So it's a very easy read, and yet very, very powerful in helping you shift your thinking around ineffective to effective meetings. So I would highly, highly recommend that one.
Yeah, it's excellent. And I often will say to people when they're asked, when I talk about Lencioni's books, the beauty of them is if you're really in a rush, you can just skip to the last third of the book.
Yeah, that's right.
And you'll get all of the insight. You don't need to read the story. It's best when you read the whole thing, but it's certainly there. Listen, I know we've come to our end of our time. There were some other questions and comments that were in the chat window. And I just do encourage, we will make sure we respond to some of those. I know there was a question there. Yvonne asked a question about covering webinars in one of our webinars. I think that's a great idea, and we'll certainly keep a note of that, as well as, is there kind of special pricing around having us in a whole bunch of meetings. And certainly that's something, if you're working with a coach, hey, listen, we will work with you. Our goal here is always to support. One of the things I do want to encourage you, if you haven't had a chance to, or if you found this of value, is their link I just posted in the chat window. Go to our website where all of the webinars that we've done in this series can be found there, and you can catch up if you've missed a few. You can easily find them on our website, or just go to the website, rhapsodystrategies.com, and you'll see a link there for webinars. Thank you, everyone, for spending some time with us here on this Wednesday afternoon. I know that this was extremely helpful for me. I always appreciate the insight that we get in these calls from everyone who participates. And thank you, Eric, for really leading the conversation, bringing us some real practical stuff. And we do our ask of you as participants is that you help us out, that when this video becomes available, that you share it on some of your social media. It's always very appreciated when you reshare some of our stuff, and it helps us promote it to a larger audience. So thank you, everyone, and we hope to see all of you on the call in May.